Look at me running, look at me jumping. Look at this clothing, look right at me.
That is our guest tonight, Laser Melena-Webber. Very excited to have them on the show tonight. Actually, I think I mispronounced that. It's Laser Melena-Webber. They are one half of the duo, the Doubleclicks, and they have just written a musical called Teaching a Robot to Love. That is one of the songs from that. Why Aren't You Happy? Laser is a musician and writer known for their nerdy folk pop band, the Doubleclicks. They sing about dinosaurs, cats, and queer feelings. Totally right up our alley. Their latest project is the musical. The great thing about it is it debuted at number 5 on the Billboard Cast Albums chart. Teaching a Robot to Love is a story about change, acceptance, queer experience, and also robots. Everybody, welcome to the show. Laser.
Oh, how you doing?
Pretty good. Pretty good.
Awesome.
How do you identify and what are your pronouns?
I identify as agender or non-binary, and my pronouns are they, them. And I don't know if you do orientation as well. I'm bisexual and pansexual. And cool.
And just plain cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
How did you choose your name?
Oh, yeah. I love this question, and I'm like, you sent me this long list of questions, and I'm like, you know what? If it was a person, if these questions were coming from not a place of love, like when cis people ask you questions and they're like, what's this? And I was just like, what? But you asking me this question, I was like, yay, I actually really like talking about my name when it's with trans folks. So Laser was a nickname that was actually part of it. Kind of the last 2 letters of my dead name were LA, and so that kind of transitioned into Laser, and it's kind of beautiful how it like dead name and then Laser they were all ran together, and then we just cut off the beginning of the dead name, and that kind of is like it was like an overlap into my new life if you kind of look at it that way.
Yeah.
It really doesn't mean anything. It doesn't. I mean, I think a lot of non-binary people have like nouns as names, and we've just decided that anything can be a name, and I believe that to be true. And every name is made up, and every gender is in a way a performance, and kind of made up. So that's where it came from, but it was really came from a nickname and nothing at the same time.
Do you get a lot of strange questions about that? Or I mean, not strange questions, but do you get a common assumption of where it comes from?
People don't know how to pronounce it a lot of the time. People want to put a Z in it, which is not how you spell laser, but that's I guess how you spell laser tag. And then people they assume that it's, I don't know, from a different country or something, or a different language, and they're like, they're afraid to say it, like to the point where sometimes I won't get called on like in a class or something because they're like afraid to say my name. But and some people are like, oh, cool name, your parents must be cool, and I'm like, well, that's not it, but let's just move on. But I have a different Starbucks name. I don't know actually how many people have a different like Starbucks or like customer service name. Just so you don't have to deal with that.
You don't have to explain it everywhere in your life. You've got some places where you can just move on.
Yeah. So my Starbucks name is Sid, so that I actually don't go to Starbucks, but for any place that I am going to deal with a stranger, just so people generally know how to pronounce and have heard that one before. Mm-hmm. And then they have a lot to say about Sid, which is a name I don't have any connection. Like I use so infrequently that they're like, oh, Sid, like Sid, this person. I'm like, yes, I should have looked that up. That feeling when you get home and you could finally take off your work name and pronouns. Yeah, absolutely.
I just love the idea of like people struggling with it. You're like, yeah, it's laser. It's French.
Yeah, laser, like. Well, it's the thing is like laser, like the noun laser that you've heard before. Like it's not hard, but I I get it. It's fine. I don't.
So in a second, we'll get to kind of the backstory that led to you discovering your identity. But when did you finally realize and identify that what you were was transgender, was gender fluid?
Okay, so the kind of the end of the story is what you're asking for.
Yes.
A lot of it was a friend of mine who is non-binary and seeing other people, friends of mine, people on the internet, and eventually stopping myself from going like, that's not fair, you're not allowed to do that, blah blah blah, like that in person, and going, actually wait, no, that's me. The reason that I'm so defensive about that is that it's me.
Mm-hmm.
I think that happened about, I really should do numbers on it, but 2017, I guess, was when I came out, and it had been a pretty strong thing in my head since 2016.
Mm-hmm.
So it was basically looking at other people and then putting a binder on and going, yep, that's right.
Isn't it funny, that moment where you realize, like you said, you kind of have had a little bit of derision for other people that were non-binary, and you're like, that's silly, and then you go, oh, I get so fired up about it because it's personal to me.
Yeah.
So
It's
then,
a very familiar feeling. I think I feel that so much for people on the internet. They're like, nah, you're not allowed to be gay. If everybody was gay, we'd all be kissing other boys. It was like, no, honey, that's you, sweetie. It's okay.
So then, looking back at your past, what were the signs that, once you reached that realization of your identity, and looked back, you could see, what breadcrumbs could you see leading to that?
Yeah, I have a very specific memory, and this is like, I don't know if this is a TMI memory, of like being a kid and just discovering my body and thinking like, I really think that there's something wrong, and like really holding on. I've held on to that my whole life of like, I don't think I'm a girl. Like, I think that there's something broken about, there's a reason I'm so tall. There's a reason that, before I knew what anatomy was, I was like, this isn't right. I know there's something wrong here. I think I was supposed to be a boy, like that kind of stuff. And that was like always in my head, like always broken. Like something that I held on to from, I guess, when I was like 9.
Okay.
There are so many pictures of me, quote unquote, cross dressing, like you can look back on that you could interpret as a sign. Another story that my sister and I like to think back on is she was reading me this astrology book. And it was like Scorpios, and a lot of, women Scorpios seek power and they wish to have the power of men. I'm like, well, yeah, but everybody would like to be a man if they could. And she never didn't say anything, but she was like, oh, that's not true. Like, not, there's so many of those things where you like just think it's a natural thing that everybody would want this. It's like, no.
Yeah, that is
That's
so.
you.
That is so
That's your
common. I
brain.
hear that so many times over and over again.
Yeah.
That we just grew up thinking, well, everybody thinks this, and it, you either think one of two things: either that everybody thinks this way, or you're really weird for thinking this, and it's not. It has nothing to do with being trans or anything. You just think it's some weird kind of, alien thoughts that are creeping into your brain.
Yeah.
Once your egg was cracked, how did you come to terms with this identity, or was it something that you adapted quickly and easily?
It took me probably a couple years to come to terms with it. I was, I had from when I was like, okay, maybe this might be it. For some reason, non-binary was a really hard thing for me to come to terms with. Like, I have lots of trans friends, and I think people, yay, everybody should be themselves, but non-binary and me is like, it was a little bit of, are you allowed to be yourself? Are you being selfish? Like, to myself, like, am I just being a lot of trouble? I mean, and there's a lot of narratives about this too, right? Are you just doing for this for the attention? And since I am a performer and I do a lot of things for attention, there, it's kind of hard to not, it was hard to separate that. But it was in my head, and it got to a point where it's sort of hard to go back. It was like, well, I started cutting my hair shorter and shorter, and started, I owned binders and I didn't wear them, but I just had them, and was like, this looks really cool when I can wear a shirt the way I've always imagined myself wearing a shirt without really consciously acknowledging that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I accidentally came out basically in a class. I was taking a improv class, and we all had to go around and say our pronouns. And I just said they, them. I hadn't really said it to anybody before. I was like, they, them. Oh, I was like, all right, well, I guess it's happening now. I said it to a stranger, better come out.
At that point in your life, did you have a particular like role model you were looking up to, or a confidant to turn to for questions?
Yeah, I had a friend, their name is Teddy. They're great. They were actually my high school quote unquote girlfriend back when we were both girlfriends. And they're incredible, and they were, I think, one of the first person I knew to come out as non-binary. And so I had been talking to them, and like, what do you know? What are your tips? Where do I go? Where are the websites that I can go lurk on? And, those message boards. And I also had, my sister was a confidant of mine as well. She's cis, but she was really good at like testing out names and pronouns with me, which is a really helpful person to know. And that was advice that Teddy had given me as well, was like, just try it with somebody and see how it feels.
That's awesome. I love the idea of having that person you can talk to. Like, do you have a spare copy of the manual?
Yeah. Come on, you like have an extra one? I'm not gonna buy, the thing yet, but I just want to know what would happen if I did.
I just want to read through it and see, like, if I were to do that, what it would all entail.
Exactly.
It's so common in our life to feel like there's a right and wrong way to do things, especially in gender transition for some reason. And
Yeah.
It's funny how much of a block that can be in starting. It's like, oh, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
It's interesting. So, getting into your coming out story, what were some of the methods that you use in coming out? Like writing a letter, or just a Facebook blast, or what were some of the methods you used, and then what were some of the most successful ones?
Yeah, I did write a letter, and then that was really stressful. The best way I came out was to come out like face to face to people, although that was hard when I like anticipated it. And I came out to some friends like right before a show I was doing. I was like, I'm gonna use this name, and then I didn't come out to the person who was hosting the show with me because we just didn't have time. And then came out to them afterwards, and that whole thing felt really frustrating and weird. I was like, okay, I gotta get a system, together. I think yeah, I don't know. I think most of the time I would just have conversations with people, but I did have like a whole letter I wrote with like a list of like, here are the the names that the words that I'm good with and the words that I'm not good with in terms of like wife or sister or like all these, and she, and here are some resources that you can learn about. The big and annoying thing was that I am in a small way a public figure, but our audience was so freaking cool about it that that ended up being like probably the easiest coming out.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow.
Was with them because they kind of self-selected to be cool about it. Like, we're either going to be cool or we're not. And yeah.
Well, then it's wonderful to have that kind of support, especially I find when it's something that's artistic like that, that is sort of your soul out there. If
Right.
if they're accepting you, then that means they accept all of you in a way, and that's pretty rad.
Yeah, I agree.
Who was the hardest for you to have that conversation with?
Ooh, he won't watch this. Probably my partner. Because uh I was really worried about what that was going to be like. He um is very sportive and is now everything he does just delights me. Sometimes, you know, people talk about what his orientation is and stuff, and he's like, if anybody wants to put me in a box, I'll come at them. It's so cute. But at the time I was like, well, I just don't know what this is gonna be like, because he started dating a person with long hair and boobs, and I started going through this process when we were getting married, and I really didn't know what that was gonna be like. And
Hmm.
it was hard. It wasn't hard in the way that I think that a lot of people have to deal with stuff where it's like, I'm losing my son, and which is like, fucking- sorry, it's awful, and it's the worst. And I understand that people have to go through their own stuff.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't handle it well when people don't react well to my news. But um, yeah, it was really tricky, and it was something that we both had to go to therapy and talk about. And I think that it was important for me to be patient, but it was also really hard for me to be patient.
Hmm.
Yeah.
What were some of your partner's key concerns that you talked about in therapy when you were starting this, and sort of how did you work
Yeah.
through that? What were your conversations that led you to a good place?
I think there was a concern that we both had friends that had gone through a transition and that had caused their relationship to end, or had correlated with a relationship ending. And that was scary, um, because we didn't want our relationship to end. And um, it I think that it was just that worry of like, I'm gonna start changing, and then I'm gonna keep changing, and then I'm gonna change so much that I'm not gonna love him anymore. Um,
Hmm.
so it ultimately came down to, you should totally have those concerns, and I need to be okay with him having those concerns because they're totally legitimate. And I need to be okay with him not just being like, yay, you're getting top surgery. I love that for you. Hooray. But he also needs to have somebody other than me to talk to about it. Is the main thing, because he's not one of those people who goes out and, Twitter threads about his problems. He's like a private, very private person.
Mhm.
So it's like, we just both need to have private, like, get people to talk to about it that isn't the world, um, or isn't each other,
Mhm.
really. And I think that that's really good. And that's something that's, I've actually been learning a lot. There's a really good company or good organization called Trans Families, and they have this FAQ on their website for families of trans folks that are coming out. And the whole thing makes me so mad. They're like, "But what's going to happen? Can I get them to stop? I'm worried about my trans kid because it's going to make their life worse, or this." And it's like, you should never say these things. It's like, listen, they need to say these things. They just need to say them not in front of their trans kid or their trans partner. And like, it's totally okay to have these conversations, but it's really great for them to have somebody else to have them
Yeah,
with.
that's a
'Cause
really important point, that to make sure not to invalidate their concerns, especially
Yeah,
especially with a partner. You make sure
exactly.
your concerns are valid. It may be not the most appropriate for me to directly be the one to help you through some of these things.
Yeah.
Go find the space to do that. That's right for you, and then come back to me. That's very cool.
It's so great, and it's so like, it's actually what the musical is about too.
Hmm. How did the conversations go with your family?
Pretty good. My parents are generally, they're, you know, they're good. They're very progressive people, very pro, um, you know, social justice and stuff like that. Um, the tricky thing is getting pronouns and names right. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that's been the only challenge. One of my favorite things that has happened is that one time we were on a family Zoom for a holiday. My sister brought a very loud dog toy to squeeze anytime somebody got my name wrong. Because my sister's just not having it. She's like my strongest advocate. One really cool thing that happened is that um, we covered a song about pronouns and called the Pronoun Song by Stevani Ross. Sunday Comes Afterwards. And it was played in like a Unitarian church service online. And my mom went to that service and they had this whole conversation during that about why using pronouns correctly is important in a way that I don't think I could have expressed to my mom,
Mm-hmm.
that a Unitarian pastor can express better to my mom. And I think that really helped. Like, my mom went to the service because she was like, oh, my kid's song. But then was like, oh, I get it. And they had like small group discussions and stuff like that. And like, it's it's just like, this is so important to me and you don't understand why. Like, I can tell when you do use my pronouns wrong to me that means that you're using them wrong all the time. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that you don't believe me and it's invalidating, and that's been the hardest part. But for the most part, it's just kind of takes time, and that has been the thing that I also have to accept. Yeah.
Yeah, we talk a lot about patience here. Patience
Yeah,
is
I
the
bet you
key
do.
to transition, both with the people around you getting names and pronouns right, or the changes you go through with HRT. There's so much that's just like you just need to be patient, and good things will happen, but in time, in sometimes a long time.
Yeah.
We're at that stage with my family where they have said even this up to this year that they don't believe in believe in the whole trans thing basically, but
Mm.
now they're at least finally trying to get the name and pronouns right, and I'm like, okay, that's some kind of win. There we go.
You're very nice to be patient with them.
I'm trying. That's, like I said, that's one thing I've been really learning through this with interviewing all these people is that a year, 2 years later, three, five, the parents come around, the people that were struggling come around, oftentimes, and it just takes them time. So it's hard, but
Great.
patience can work out for you in the long run.
Yeah.
As we wrap up the coming out story, was there
Yeah.
anybody, you mentioned your fan base,
Hmm.
but was there anybody else that supported you or accepted you in a way that was surprising to you?
The only thing that's coming to my mind is my grandfather was a Baptist minister, and he passed away pretty soon after I came out. But something that he said to me once was one of my favorite things, which was, I always knew more that there was more to all of that be yourself music that you make. Yeah, we do write a lot of be yourself music. That's good. There was something underneath all that be yourself music. So it was, it was, you know, I never had to fight with him about it. So I don't really know how he felt, but
Mm.
made me very happy.
That's kind of cute that he sussed that out though. That's pretty fun.
He was so into interpreting our songs. So it was very funny. It was playful.
What was your first experience after coming out and trying to find community and more people like you to hang out and be with?
Um, I, that's a great question. I was lucky in that because of all this be myself music that I make, a lot of the Doubleclicks fans are queer. We have a lot of queer fans and trans fans, and um, it's really badass actually. So I, at the beginning of coming out, I didn't have a huge community. I mean, there's a lot of was a lot of Facebook grouping and a lot of um one-on-one DMing with people, which was really nice. And reaching out to some of the people that I already knew, just through the band and through the community. That was the beginning of it, I guess. It's gotten much better since then.
Well, yeah, once you come out and they know that about you and they're already kind of predisposed to that.
Yeah. During COVID, which I still feel very fresh in my coming out, it was really hard to have around one person and then only talk to my family, and all of them are cis. And so I set up a weekly queer game thing where every week all of us who are all, queer or mostly trans and non-binary folks, is just like, can we please just have a moment where we all hang out with each other and don't have to be perceived, and if we make jokes about trans stuff, it's our own opt-in, and we all have this language and stuff. It's so important, I think, and it's so nice. And also I found a trans therapist really early on. I thought that was really important to find somebody. I tried so hard because I went on like the Psychology Today website, and it was the first time I auditioned therapists, because I first went to like a cis lesbian therapist, and like the whole conversation was really freaking weird. It was like it felt like very condescending or something, like, oh, gender, that must be difficult. Oh, okay. And I'm like, I don't think you grok what's happening. Like, this doesn't feel right. And then I found a trans therapist who was actually trans and had been through the transition, can relate to me on like all of that stuff. It's like, sometimes you're just a person who happens to have this kind of background radiation, and she's one of my favorite people. So that was cool too.
And how has that helped with your mental state through transition? Has it really been a key part of helping accept yourself and kind of find that self-love?
Yeah, I think it's all, I mean, just like you were just saying, it has helped me know to be patient, which is great. Like, that everything takes time, but you can have people around you that show you that it's going to be okay. But also just having moments where you don't have to be defensive or be worried, or like, there was so much time, especially at the beginning, where I felt like I would have to explain myself or something, or it would be like a big deal. And to be around people where it wasn't a big deal is just such a relief, and it's so much less exhausting to be alive.
An experience that I had in trying to find community was at first not feeling like I belonged, because I hadn't fully accepted myself yet. And then later it comes around to like what you're talking about, where it's like, that's your preferred space because you don't have to have those conversations. You don't have to have the explanations each time. Did you have something similar with that, like in the beginning, or because they were part of your fan base, your main community, you found that was an easier transition for you?
Yeah, I had so one of my very, very best friends is a trans woman, and right before I came out, we had actually just sat down. We had gone to a queer film festival and sat down, and she kind of gave me a long talk about how she didn't understand non-binary people. And I wasn't out to her yet. Although I would say, strong non-binary vibes at the time. And it honestly wasn't anything from her, but it made me be like, okay, I feel weird talking about this with her, and I don't know, like, I feel like, what if I'm stepping into something I don't understand, or like, how trans do you have to be? What is the right, like, way to be trans? Am I doing it wrong? Like, that kind of stuff, where I wouldn't like um try to go run into a space and be like, everybody look at me. There's a coffee shop in LA that is, or there was, that was queer, and it was like, always kind of felt like, am I allowed to be here? Hello, I am kind of gay. Am I here? Am I allowed? And eventually, just, I think it did become more and more comfortable as I became more comfortable with myself.
Yeah.
If that makes sense, yeah.
What have the challenges been for you at the sort of the intersection of, coming out and I mean, you already had sort of a public persona, and now you've come out. Your fan base for the most part supported you. Were there any challenges that came up in that, or any parts that kind of gave you pause?
I didn't know how it was gonna go, and honestly, not if anything bad happened, I've probably blocked it out. We pissed off a lot of people in a few places enough that I think a lot of the bigots left before I came out. We dropped a few bombs, just in terms of like, "Hey, we hate the president," or, "We hate these things." Um, and that was kind of done by the time I came out. And I talk about this a lot, but I really like to just have boundaries. I'm a person who likes to know what to expect. So when we like start a show, for example, um, the first thing we say on stage is I go, "Hello, this is my sister Aubrey, and she's amazing." And she goes, "This is my sibling Laser, and they're amazing." And it's like, this is the first thing that's happening. We're not saying like, "Hello, this is a non-binary person, and this is how you use pronouns." We're just saying, this is the correct way to do it, and this is who we are. And um, people are usually really chill. And if anybody has a problem, they haven't really. If it has come up, no, it hasn't made it to my desk.
Nice. Yeah, I love that you've sort of pre-filtered your audience with some of
Yeah.
those things, and there you go. Now you're set.
I mean, there are crappy comments all the time, but I wouldn't consider them to be fans, and I just erase them so I don't remember them anymore.
Nice.
Yeah.
Our more ethereal question, kind of a big picture and feeling sort of idea here. What does
Yeah.
transition look like to you, or what does it mean to you?
Um, it's such a good question because to me it's so hard to call that transition is like a noun, but it's also a verb. But I don't know that um it's weird as a verb because that implies that there's like a beginning and an end. And to me, I guess to me, the verb version of that was like me thinking I might be non-binary and then coming out. And I don't think that there's like anything that's going to make me more non-binary or trans than I ever was or isn't or whatever. But yeah, I don't really have an answer other than I don't think that I'm any more complete now that I've had like a gender reaffirming breast reduction than I was before I did that.
Mhm.
But I think the longer that I am out, the more I understand what I'm doing, which is nice.
Sort
Yeah.
of along the lines of the patience idea.
Yeah.
What are some of the key fears that you've had throughout your journey and exploration, and how did you overcome those?
Ooh, that's good. I was worried that everybody was gonna think I was a real weirdo that was making everything about me. And then I overcame that by thinking I wouldn't think this about my non-binary friends because I think they're great.
Hmm.
I was worried to change my name and change my gender marker, because I was worried about being on a list, you know? Like, especially under our previous president, it's like it felt really close to us all being rounded up. And like it still feels pretty close to that. Um, I honestly didn't change it until we got a new president. And I don't know how much of that was fear, how much of that was laziness, but that's just true, I guess. Um and it was, and I do have that fear still of like having an X on my back. But then I look at I have a lot of passing privilege, and whenever I have those fears, I just think of my friends who don't have all of the many privileges that I have, and I'm like, I just want to throw myself in front of them and try to save them. Like for whenever. I can. I don't know. I don't. It just feels like a shitty time to be trans, but it always is. So there you go.
Yeah, right. We're in this weird period where it's like a great time to be trans. There's so many more people that know about it, and pronouns are a thing, and the whole deal. And then it's just like there is also so much backlash and just horrible things going on. Have your goals shifted as you've gone through your transition or your journey? Did you have anything in mind, or did you have anything that you thought you would never do that is now on the table that you've done?
In terms of gender affirming stuff, I didn't think I was gonna get any sort of top surgery for a long time, and then I decided I would when I found out that there's like more different ways to do it, which is like a Facebook group kind of thing. And like you don't have to, it doesn't always have to be this is very specific, but like there's like either there is a female chest or a male chest, which is like not true,
Mm.
obviously, as a real gender is obvious, doesn't exist kind of thing. But it's so that was really when I found that out, then I was like, then I got the bee in my bonnet that like, well, I want the chest that I want, and that became like a really big thing for me, but it wasn't a thing that I ever thought I was gonna want.
Mm.
Um, Other than that, not really. I don't at this moment think I'll do hormones, but that could change. I allow myself to believe in the power and change. That's the whole thing, you know? It's okay.
So it sounds like your transition is more, with the exception of that surgery you mentioned, sort of more internal, more about, your self-identity and learning that and coming to grips with it.
Yeah, it's been a lot of it in the way that I would describe the different feeling, and it is very, I guess, internal. But just waking up every morning and not having to put on a gender that didn't fit me. Um, Putting on a gender that didn't fit me was a lot of work. It was exhausting. It was so much, and I didn't realize how much it wasn't even a physical thing, you know? Like I could wake up in the morning to put on a dress right now and eyeliner if I wanted to, and it would feel fine. But the fact that I put on with it this gender that I had, um,
Hmm.
it was exhausting. It was fake and it was not me. And now I don't have to do that. And it's just so, and it's all completely about me and not about how I'm perceived. It's just like, it's freedom. It's wonderful.
So my next question is a two-parter. What forms of dysphoria do you struggle with, if you do? And then, as someone who's non-binary, as someone who is binary trans like I am,
Yeah.
there are specific things that I can do to just dive fully into my gender, to get all done up and really go all in on it. What are the things, or what are some of the things that you do to find validity in your identity on a day when you're sort of struggling?
It's a really good question. Uh, Dysphoria for me, I mean, there was a lot of stuff with my chest as soon as I decided that I didn't want it, which it was more of a like realizing that like with gender, like, oh, actually this thing has been pissing me off for a long time kind of situation. As soon as I that happened, I was just like, get this out of here. I'm over it. Um, really mad. And really angry whenever I saw it. Um, but that's gone now, which is lovely. These days I still have a little bit with like feminine parts of my body, like my hips and stuff. I'm like not chill with my physical body
Mm.
all the time. Um, I think that a lot of my diving into my identity has to do with talking to my friends that are also non-binary and just jamming out. They're so funny. Like I think that there is a superpower that trans people have of like puns and joy, like just being the most like funniest people to play games with. Um and just talk shit about transphobes and like in a way that's so empowering, and that just makes me feel better about myself. And that's one of the best things I can do for my mental health. Um, and then yeah, I mean, I love the feeling of like I do a lot of shopping. I do a lot of like I've started making my own clothes as well, of like making my own clothes that fit me the way I want to, and piecing together like I want a shirt that goes like this, and like there's like really weird stuff you probably know, like men's shirts button this way and women's shirts button this way, and like when you are making your own clothes you can decide, you know, you can choose what you want your clothes to look like, or if you how you want them to hit your hips if not, or and that I feel like that gives me a lot of control over how I perceive myself.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So we talked earlier about the fears that you've had to overcome.
Mm.
Did you have any hurdles to your journey, and how did you overcome those?
Ooh, what do you mean by that? Like financial hurdles or like
Just basically, internally or externally, were there any kind of blockers for you that, just sort of presented a roadblock, either within yourself or in the outside world, and how were you able to navigate those?
good question. I guess the only thing I can think of is like I did have to like fundraise to change my name. I dealt with a whole bunch of crap with my insurance to get my surgery because they had like the insurance I was on had like a BMI limit, which is so stupid. A lot of people have that where they're like, you're too fat to get gender affirming surgery. And it's like, well, I'm too depressed to lose weight, so deal with it. I just changed my insurance and found an insurance that worked, which I was very lucky to be able to do. Um, and uh yeah, that's the main thing I can think of. Like finance and then like the flopping health insurance infrastructure in this country is terrible. Don't recommend. I mean, I think it's bad everywhere, but yeah.
Yeah. Yep, we've been covering in the news. There are triumphs and definite struggles all over the world. Is there anything that you feel you've been able to accomplish because of your transition and your gender journey?
Um, I I mean, I feel a lot lighter just emotionally that I know who I am and I don't have to fake it anymore. I just think it makes me make more genuine art. It makes me better at my job. Um, and I think that's great. Makes me way better at making friends. I've been really bad at making friends my whole life, and I feel like I'm way better at it now because I'm like, this is who I actually am. Yeah, we're doing it. I don't have to pretend to be a girl. Um, and I mean, I'm really excited it's always been my mission with my music to like take all my anger and turn it into something positive. But now my whole mission is this flow chart about basically teaching us from the time from when we're young that if you are a queer kid, that it's awesome to be queer and that you're allowed, and you're not an inconvenience, and that's your real identity. Or if you aren't queer, that queer people exist, and LGBTQIA plus people are in the world and around, and this is how their experiences are, and like let's friggin' live it.
Yeah. Is there a favorite thing that you've learned on your journey?
Ooh, I mean, I love learning about historical trans stories. It's one of my favorite things. And obviously they're full of trauma a lot of the time, but there is a really good story in a book called Female Husbands, which is what the previous classification for what some people would be trans men now and some people would be cross-dresser, whatever it is. And there was a person who, you know, ran away from home, pretended to be a man or was a man, whatever, and married a lady, and then got sued when people found out that this was a person with a vagina and not a person with a penis, you know, back in the like 19th, 18th century. And the wife who was suing them said that the reason that they didn't know that their husband was really a woman was that they were so good in bed. It was like, listen, it couldn't have been a lady I was sleeping with. I came too hard. Anyway, that's my favorite historical trans story.
That is pretty great. That is a good
Yeah.
one. Yep.
Yep.
It's a
There's
good
just-
defense.
I'm sorry, okay? I just listen.
I didn't
How is
know.
it even possible? How is it even possible? Lesbians can't have sex. I recommend, like, there's just so many badass. I mean, you had to be a total badass, right? But like these stories of people who were like, it's either just because you were a woman and wanted to be a doctor and that wasn't allowed, or because you were a trans man and like had these lives, but like freaking fascinating and amazing, wonderful lives. So cool stuff.
What is the advice that you have to give and pass on to young or closeted trans folks out there?
Find your people, I guess. Yeah, that would be my main thing. Find your people. People believe you. People love you. And I guess we've talked a lot about patience. It's so frustrating to hear. It's the worst thing to hear because you don't want to be patient. But there are amazing lives waiting for you. Yeah.
Patience is hard and it sucks, but yeah, it is necessary. But I
And
do love
like,
that. I do love that
cis
sentiment.
people have feelings too, which is really stupid. And sometimes they have them in front of you and they shouldn't, but they do.